This is TWiT.
Sony's next major gaming console is the PlayStation 5. It's now shipping, and people are really excited, of course. This is such a great time for gamers right now. People are so excited. Not only does the console look like a next-generation system, it elevates the sensory experience within its gameplay. Elise Favis from the Washington Post's launcher wrote all about her time with the PS5 and joins us to talk about it. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure to get you on. Thank you so much for taking some time with us today. So I have to start with kind of the hardware itself, because as kind of small by comparison to like things like gameplay and stuff it might sound, people do care about the look of this console. It's going to be sharing space in their living room on the tabletop next to the TV or wherever they're going to put it. What about the hardware design strikes you in person versus what you saw kind of around the announcements? And it looks very different from consoles that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, this is a massive console. It's Titanic is the way I like to explain it. It takes considerable room, like you said, in the living room. I think some people will struggle to find a spot for it. We definitely did. I have a 55-inch screen TV, and it, when it's up horizontally, it goes pretty much halfway up that TV. Wow. But it does have a striking design. It's black and white. It's got a kind of glossy black interior with the two kind of white panels on the sides. And there's like two kind of edges that kind of jut out at the end. It has really beautiful LED lighting that glows when the console is on or it's in rest mode. So it looks good. It's not my favorite design. It's not as compact as the PS4 was. I'm looking over there because I'm looking at my PS4. But I think despite its large size, it's a really incredible console in terms of the hardware that powers it.
Awesome. And that's what I think people probably are maybe more interested to really get to the nitty gritty about in your experience, because you've heard all about the power of this system. How do you think that power has been demonstrated through the use or through the launch of the kind of premier games that are coming out right at launch? Are they doing a good job of tapping into that? And are you impressed by what you're seeing? Or do you see room for so much more to wow you 1-2 years down the line like usually happens?
Yeah, so the two games that I've spent the most time with are Spider-Man Miles Morales and Astro's Playroom. Both do a pretty good job of demonstrating the performance side of this console. So starting with Spider-Man Miles Morales, the thing that struck me the most is just how quickly the game loads. We've got lightning fast speed. For example, if you're like teleporting, which is called fast travel from like one side of the map to the other, it's pretty much instantaneous, which is crazy to think. That was not possible before. Games load up really fast, once again, pretty much instantaneously. So Miles Morales has no load screens at all.
Wow.
Astro's Playroom is I think, a really good demonstration of the DualSense controller. So that's I have it right here, actually. So this is the new controller for the PS5. It looks similar in some ways, like the button structure and the PS5. There's a PlayStation button right in the middle to start your console and things like that. It's similar in layout to the previous controllers. But what's most impressive is this haptic feedback that it has. And Astro's Playroom, this is a platformer, just a fun kind of going down memory lane of PlayStation. And it does a really excellent job of just showing that feature. So, for example, when I say haptic feedback, it's a more sophisticated sense of vibrations and sensations in comparison to like what the DualShock 4 controller was capable of. So you can feel like the pitter patter of rain, falling down on your head, or walking along sand, metal, or just the ground is all going to feel different in the palms of your hands.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, those are so experiential that it's really hard to like, kind of like VR. It's really hard to explain someone that experience, how it ties into kind of the player's involvement in the game and immersion into the game until you probably, I have to imagine, have one of those controllers in your hand and you feel the dragging of metal. However that feels like, I don't know what that would feel like on a controller.
Speaking to some of the developers, especially first party like Sony developers, Insomniac, for example, who created Spider-Man, they struggled with that. They struggled with the marketing side of that. During the pandemic especially, we're all stuck inside. We're not going to malls. We're not going to conventions. So they didn't really have the same chance that they normally would to market this controller and put it in the player's hands until really the console shipped today.
Yeah, indeed. Well, one thing that the controller does have for it is, like the console itself, it looks so different that it's almost, at least to me, it's inviting in that sense. And so if people can't really actually get it into the palm of their hands to test it out, at least there's another kind of way to draw on that really does work online, when people are reading about it. What about the visual experience here? Because we've got ray tracing in gameplay. And that ties in, of course, that probably makes a difference depending on the settings inside of the game or what type of screen you're viewing this on. But how did that impact the gameplay for you?
Sure. Going back to Spider-Man Miles Morales, that's just the game that I've been using as a benchmark mostly for these kind of technical tests.
Sure.
But so Spider-Man Miles Morales comes with two different modes. You've got fidelity mode and you have performance mode. So performance mode lets you play at 60 frames per second, but then it removes those kind of graphical enhancements like ray tracing that you talk about. Whereas fidelity mode is at 30 frames per second, but I definitely think that is the best way to play the game because you get all those incredible VFX and graphical fidelity that the PS5 is able to do. So when we're talking about ray tracing, the thing that you'll really notice the most is just how much more environments pop and how much more depth they have. Shadows are just like more well cast. Sunlight shining in from windows looks more real. Some even little details like reflections on puddles or, Spider-Man Miles Morales takes place in Manhattan during winter. So ice and snow looks more reflective. These might sound like small details, but putting that all together in an environment, it looks really good.
Yeah, it's one thing that I'm really excited for. Obviously, with every console generation jump, that's one of the things that's the easiest to look at and be like, oh my God, it looks so real. And then you get to the end of the console cycle and you're like, it looks just the way it is, but the next one looks real now.
Right.
So it's kind of exciting when you're at the beginning of that cycle because it's very eye-opening and awe-inspiring. What about audio? I know that we've got the Pulse 3D wireless headset for 3D audio, and I'm an audio buff at the same time. Like sometimes I feel like these things can be very gimmicky when it comes to audio effects, especially in a headphone environment. What was your experience there?
Well, you might be more of an audio buff than me, but I got the headset right here. I had a pretty good experience with it. And it's not just the headset. There's an engine inside the console called Tempest. This is a new audio engine that allows for basically directional audio. And what that means is you will feel sound all around you, for lack of a better term, in front of you and back of you on the sides. So let's say an enemy shoots a gun, you may feel that bullet was by your head, for example. It depends on the game. There are moments in Miles Morales that were neat, but it seems to be much more apparent in Demon Souls, which is what I started playing yesterday. But for an example, even in Miles Morales, when you're like swinging through the city, with your web powers, what was cool is like as your arc lowers closer to the ground, you can hear the sound of like horns and people passing by more so than before. Or like I said earlier, you know, bullets or even projectiles being launched to you, you'll feel that come by near to you.
That's cool. Cool. I want to definitely experience that then. Another thing that I'm looking forward to that I'm happy to see that suddenly there's this renewed attention to is backwards compatibility. I do have the PS4 downstairs and a number of games for that. So what was your takeaway? Because it sounds like you've got a pretty large library of games for the PS4, like pretty solid backwards compatibility moving up to the PS5.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
Right.
But, you know, looking at the PS4, Sony said there was only about 10 games that are not backward compatible. And those are small titles that even I didn't really know about. So most people, I think, are going to be happy with being able to play their PS4 games from the disc or from their downloaded library. You can't play earlier generation games, so PS3, PS2, PS1. Some of those are possible through PlayStation Now, which is the cloud-based streaming service that was also available on the PS4. But of course, that depends on your internet connection, and there have been latency issues for a long time. So usually people don't turn to PlayStation Now, and I wouldn't recommend it. But if you have no other choice, sure. But I think in comparison to Xbox, PlayStation does have a less robust answer to backward compatibility, because on Xbox you can play several previous generations as well on Series X.